Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, the podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, Agile experts, including professional Scrum trainers and other industry thought leaders, share their stories and experiences. We also explore hot topics in our space with thought-provoking, challenging, energetic discussions. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. In today's podcast, we're talking to Tomasz Maj, Head of Product Ops at Odevo. Odevo is leading the way in property management and residential services. Some of you may know Thomas from his work at McKinsey and the research that we did together, actually, on the pursuit of value and some other things. Welcome to the podcast, Thomas.
Oh, thanks for having me. Very happy to be here.
It's great to have you here because you know what's interesting? Since you left McKinsey, you took this role at Odevo. And what's interesting is that the world of software development, product development has shifted quite considerably during those few years. So I'd love to get your take on that. But before we do that, the listeners would love to know a little bit about what you do at Odevo and, you know, what they do and, you know, sort of that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, yeah, Odevo brings a lot of small to medium sized residential property managers across, let's say, the Northern Hemisphere. So we're present in Europe. We're present in the United States and in Mexico. So pretty much the big part of the Northern Hemisphere. And we bring a lot of small to medium property managers to a common place, right? So it's a very fragmented industry, and our main goal is to create a leading property it's important here that residential property manager in the world. That's the goal. That's the ambition. And we also see the power of technology in that. So my main job is to, it's a lot of small companies, you have to bring them together. We also have to bring a lot of that tech together. So how do we create an operating system? How do we build a model of product engineering and these businesses, we call them operational companies, all work together? So my main job is to bring that, create that glue that binds all those things together. So we have multiple applications and multiple systems in Finland, Sweden, the UK, Spain, Portugal, Italy, United States, Mexico, and all those countries are different legislation, different use cases, and many times also different types of property. So we're looking where we want to bring things together, but where do we want to keep them autonomous, not to disrupt their day-to-day operations. They're not, and our ambition was never to have one system to rule them all, but to really apply strategic, scalable thinking in building a technology setup and an operational setup that fits that. So that's my job, is to sort of bring all those things together and have that happen, which is super exciting and super fun.
Oh, I can imagine it is. So you've got to sort of balance this centralization, this single platform, with the need for very diverse, very different.
It's a good question. I don't think we have multiple platforms, multiple applications. We've tried to bring everyone onto a single. It doesn't make sense, right? Because Sweden with a few big, like there is not a lot of. There's a couple of bigger players in Sweden. Also, Sweden is a comparably smaller when it comes to a population country than the UK, where you have many other smaller companies. Or you go to Germany, where the fragmentation is so high. You know, the biggest guys have around 2% of the market, right? So we're actually more about enabling that diversity without sort of blocking. So, and while being ready to scale. Right, that's the number one. Like, we're going to grow, we're going to continue growing. We double in size almost every year, so we have to start continuously embed an operating model that scales with that ambition. So we do not have a single platform, which has its upsides and downsides. a lot of things is that there's a lot of fragmentation, right? On the other hand, we are not botched up. We don't slow down because one country is waiting for another country.
And it also gives you the opportunity, by not having one platform, to do a lot of very quick, I don't want to call it experimentation because that's always a bad word, right? But innovation, that's a much better word.
Yes.
And try it on one platform or one of the products, sorry, and then learn from that and then drive it into the other products as necessary.
Exactly. And I mean, with the two-letter word that everyone is using, this is, I think, instrumental. Like, the two-letter word
And
that makes it easier for us too.
and that is the reason I have to say, listeners, the reason why I invited Tomasz to the podcast today is because we've stayed in touch. It's great to have somebody that's driving such level of innovation in a company that's growing and that's sort of got a solid set of very human principles as well. So I've stayed in touch, and during these conversations there's been this really quite interesting conversation about AI. And so the rest of the podcast, we're going to really focus on that. I'd love to get your take. Over the last 18 months, I guess 2 years, AI has suddenly become something that was machine learning, and we talked about it a little bit, to something that's driving everything. How has it affected Odevo and your teams and your organization? And what's your take on it, Tomasz?
Yeah, I mean, I think one good news is we saw AI was coming quite early. I mean, even when I joined, there was already an existing AI team that was building. Well, we have our own Odevo GPT, for example, right? So that way, customer data doesn't get out and is not used by other models. We realize that's very important. Data is clear here, critical here. So we wanted to sort of keep it in house. So we did that. We've been building a lot of simple tools, a lot of very useful AI tools for our industry. The property management industry is still, in many places, underdeveloped. They don't have access to all the tools you would think you would take as standard, right? I mean, there are still places where pen and paper is still used to manage properties. The Post-it in someone's notebook could be worth €1,000, and hey, it's a Post-it until it gets booked. So you have the elements of that. So we started using AI very early on to help in processing invoices. And I mean, some of our companies have to have separate warehouses just to store all that paper that gets processed, right? So we started using that. And as I joined, I got into it, right? I started using Odevo GPT, Chat GPT. I remember when I heard about, hey, I'm going to try and with Chat GPT build an application. I remember that in 2 years ago. I was like, that can't be hard. And it was super difficult, right? So it crashed and burned when it had to set up a database. And we progressed, and we constantly saw, Copilot, GitHub Copilot, and other tools coming up, and they were showing potential, especially in like documentation. And we saw those types of use cases, like it can speed up that testing. And then over time, it just got faster and faster and faster. It was like every 3 months, you would go and it would just be another jump, right? So we constantly were on top of it, but yet in an industry like ours, our applications are not sophisticated, big systems, right? They're usually, like I said, small, tailored for the need of the country, of the business we work with. So yeah, that was it.
Do you actually think, though, Tomasz, that actually that put you in a much better position because of the size? And I'm not saying these systems aren't complex, because I'm sure they are, each of these ones, but because of the size and the footprint, that gave you the ability to apply AI quite rapidly without having to worry about this sort of like this platform that does everything, that is being used in a million different ways that nobody really understood. Do you think that put you in a better position?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think one of the biggest ones was how much people will it impact, right? So we have some platforms that are super early in their stage where we can go a bit bolder, where we have others that have a much more dominant place on the market, right? So there we're like, oh, take it easy. Let's not overdo it. But that, having that diversification of different platforms with different sort of business impact absolutely allows us to be bold in other places, but much more cautious in others. But the upside, the flip side of that was for the ones where it's much more complex, the systems are bigger. We saw a big uptake in what now everyone calls vibe engineering or vibe coding, right? So that was interesting. That was an interesting sort of change recently. This has been recently in the last 4 or 5 months.
So explain to me. So you've got this app or a product. I guess we should call it a product. Mm-hmm. This product, you've got an engineering team around it, well understood. They're delivering at the moment. Where does vibe coding fit into that? You've already got like tests. You've already got a build pipeline. You've already got the business are working with product managers in a very defined way. How does vibe coding change that?
It I think democratizes access to features in a way. I don't know if that's the right term, but you sometimes you need to process data. And then you have to download that data. You get a CSV or you ask for a SQL, right, to give you a lot of data, and then usually that would then go through some sort of a process. Some Excel wizard would process and pull out, and then it's a lot of things, a lot of steps. All those steps can be now put into a vibe coded app with the power of a prompt, right, or several prompts, and you don't have to do a lot of like connecting, like API, MCP, all that. You can you can still use that CSV, but now build in an upload feature. Make sure you don't, know what you're doing from a privacy security perspective, or at least count that the tool you're using can. And you're now able to get information much quicker without needing to be an Excel or a data wizard, right?
So is the business, like the product?
It's our operational companies, the accountants in our companies, the customer managers in our companies, probably soon also the maintenance people that, fix the elevators or make sure the radiator is working. Will also be able to do that. They're using it. I mean, it's just very easy.
So,
and it's impressive. It's impressive.
Oh, I mean, it sounds. I mean, that is the ultimate, push left, as it were, isn't it? The ability to move how capabilities are being delivered on your products from your IT, your software developers to the field, which is really, really exciting. Yeah. But how did you enable that? Do you have a machine learning ops or an AI ops or
No, it was, it's a great question. It was organic. We didn't do anything. We people just heard about the tool and started using it. And we actually had to, had to react to that and say, hey, when you're using it, I think it's a good idea, but remember about privacy, about security, about which data to use, which data not to use. But then it was a very quick turnaround. Very quickly, these organizations, these operational companies, built in guardians, as they call them, to here, go through this regulation and get a certificate, right? Or remember, this is private data, this is sensitive data. You should never use this. Ask for permission for that. And then continue doing. And of course, there's limitations, right? The appetite grows with vibe coding. The more you're able to do, the more you want to do, because it's just so easy. And I see, like, on the LinkedIn sphere, is that a term? A lot of hate, right? A lot of haters going, oh, if you don't understand the code, you shouldn't be building it, or like all of this. And I think those are the guys that will soon realize their world is ending faster than they can realize, because it is becoming sort of building applications, sometimes bigger, more complex than we could imagine before, will be easier and easier. over and over. Like I've been using these Vibe coding tools, especially one for 7-8 months now. And I remember when I started out, it was very bad, especially on the security side, data processing side. Slow the database grew, it got slower. The security was a bit flimsy. You were afraid to create a user. It was more like a one pager, right? Or like a landing page or static content, right? So instead of just using Vix or other one, you would just do this because it was cooler. It was AI. But now you can do full SSO. You can connect it to databases. You can have email. Like, it is quite impressive, and it's continuously, like, exponentially improving over and over, right? So it is, and that's one of the, like, I see that as one of the biggest shifts, the democratization of application development. Like, anyone can build it, and it takes 30 minutes to get something that you could probably use easily, but it's addictive too. But that's a side of it.
It is a little addictive. Did you do anything to the underlying products to enable your business your business users to vibe on that data, or are they really just vibing off an extract CSV that your product allows it to create?
No, we're actively, depending on the market, we're actively looking for opportunities to support this. While we still want to keep the core competencies, I mean, core competencies there, right? We want to have those in, especially data is quite, we don't want sort of complete freedom. You do what you want, read and write. We do want to have some sort of control, but on these, like, edge cases, we want to enable that, because on the other hand, why would we want to be building all these edge cases, right? Whether it's a small app just to manage parking transfers of a building or stuff like that, like, you build it, it's fine, right? It's okay. But we're starting. It's sort of it's something that's new to us. I mean, I think for everybody, the speed of it. I mean, I still feel like I went for Christmas break. I ate my delicious pierogi and all the other great Polish food. I came out of this Christmas sleep and came to January. I was like, wait, this is a different. What happened? Like, it's a different world.
Yeah, there was releases of some of the platforms over in early January that have, and actually early February in particular, which has completely revolutionized how you can rapidly build software, and that seems to be increasing. So you just allowed it to happen. You didn't have a more structured sort of like AI ops kind of like. But you brought up security and governance, and obviously these businesses are they're very aware of the markets they operate in. So then they took that maturity, and particularly Scandinavia. I'm not sure I'd trust the UK ones quite as much. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so they took it on board and started to work with it. In terms of, has it had an impact in your development teams? Is it more the development teams have just been using more augmentation around testing, writing more code?
No. We actually, I think it was September, we had a realization that AI is coming. We can't fight it, and fight is the wrong word, but we have to embrace it, and I think we have to support our engineers with it. So we went out, we searched, we asked our friends and our colleagues for companies that could do a proper end-to-end AI training, like for engineers, and AI training that takes you from the very basic of, these are the European standards of AI use. Remember, we're in Europe, so GDPR and all those things is quite important, and we do want to do more than we have to, whenever it comes to stuff like that. So we want to do a training from the basics to agentic development. So it will be a 5-step learning journey from zero to hero, right? So ending with agentic, with stuff like BMAT, Gastown, or Claude Flow, and all those tools, starting with learning just, here's prompting. Here is how it's. Let's talk about prompting. Let's talk about terminal. So on, spec driven all the way to agentic. We didn't know that this was a. I mean, we knew this was going to be a big deal, but over the next 4 months, it turned out to be a slam dunk, right? I mean, where most of we had cohorts, so we had 5 cohorts.
Yeah.
We didn't want to. We broke people into small groups. All the cohorts finished this training mid-February now, and it was perfectly sort of landing right when the boom happened, right? So now I would say 95% of our engineers have the basic understanding all the way to agentic development, and of course, depending on the platform, the language, and because we also don't have many of our applications use different languages, they have different setups. Yet we see a huge uptake. All engineers are using AI. Some, of course, most of them are not building agents, but many of them are using spec-driven design or specs to build stuff. They're all heavily using, in their like IDEs and working with apps. We have several engineers, very senior engineers, who said, "I haven't actually touched syntax since January, right? Because I don't need to. I just work with Claude and I check, I code review but I don't actually write the code myself." So I think that was a perfectly sort of that's how we enabled it.
And do you have, when you build a team, or do you have agentic sort of like goal-based agents that are sitting to do TDD, BDD, or to do code review, or is it a little bit more sort of fluid with an engineer or a tester, or is it how are you partitioning work? What are you allowing development teams to make those decisions however they want, and developers to make those decisions?
Yeah, we're not like setting a standard, and I think we're not going like you need to all fall into this. Let's say exact Odevo ways of working, and every team has to do that. No, we're giving a lot of freedom, but we're all encouraging and sort of expecting that they go beyond copy pasting code into Odevo or whatever, odevogpt.com or something. That's not what we want. We want them to actually be actively using it. But sure, not everyone still uses it to that extent of using it. So we do have some teams that do that. They have set up agentic development flows, while others are more focused on specs, while others are just more sort of working on a code base, but working with a co-pilot of sorts, whether it's Microsoft, GitHub, or whatever they prefer. Yes, and I think because the main reason for that, because it's just so fast. Like,
Yeah,
we don't know.
It's impossible almost to define those standards and put those best practices in place because they're just continuously emerging and then changing.
Yes, or there's like. Yes, and on the other hand, you don't want to sort of say, "Oh, I know the way," because you don't, and we have to create that freedom, right? And that's why we are doing more and more. I think what's becoming more clear is like this sharing of experiences, building. We're constantly trying to find ways to show and tell, build collaboration. We have introduced in last year lead engineers as a role within a team to then, so they should also now facilitate that knowledge sharing and be the lead of that team in a way to also experiment and help. So that's how we're applying, but trying to come up with like, oh, this is how we're going to do agentic development. Sure, we can say for the month of March.
But well, no, because it'll already be out of date by the time you say
and
it. Right?
April comes, here is a new one, right?
It is interesting because historically, software development, product development has historically, you sort of best practices emerge in the industry. They may come from an individual often do. You sort of pick them up on Lenny's podcast, or Pragmatic Engineer, or whatever your
Yeah.
source is. Back in the day, it used to be magazines when I was a software engineer. Oh my God, that's so true. Or conferences, you'd go, but the
Yeah.
pace,
Yeah.
now it's not coming so much. It really is that fusion between technology capability and human being, and it's happening at such a vast speed. It's not one individual that's driving this. It's not like the guy invented aspect-oriented programming, or the early, object-oriented, or the TDD guys,
Yeah.
Kent Beck, etc. It's sort of everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. It's a very different.
Yeah.
It's very odd to observe. It's kind of different than anything I've ever seen before. Do you feel the same
Yeah,
way, Thomas?
absolutely. I mean, I think everyone is overwhelmed, right? I mean, if you're
Yeah.
not, then you're doing something wrong. I mean, I even with Claude built an AI digest that
So,
tracks
so have
sort
I.
of I think at one point you have to. So it just scrapes the internet, all the different feeds, and then populates a Slack channel for me. So, and the whole organization is a public one. So you see the top 10 sort of big news updates scored 8 to 10, because you just have to keep up somehow, right? And with some sort of a smart summary there. But I think one thing that's worrying me is that everyone is sort of going very wide. Everyone is looking like another option here, going wide. But there's no one. There's very little people who are saying, "Hey, where do we converge? Let's open it up again." But at
Yeah.
least at this point, let's say this is what we're trying. And I think we're trying to sort of bring that sort of I don't know, get control of this chaos, right? And I
Yeah.
think this is one of the things. Like the loop will be immensely fast, right? So if you bought a project from someone, or you have a PMO that told you, here is our 2-year plan to do an AI transformation, then I think that's where you should ask yourself, does this make sense? Have you ever seen a plan for exponential growth? I don't think so. So it's one of those things where you should be asking yourself, is that the right? But you should also converge, and then again go wide. But we have to have more of those cycles, because now everyone is just going wild, playing with everything. No one is really trying to, okay, this is what we're going to try for us now. Let's learn from that so we can then go wide again. But you need to sometimes close the loop. And I think no one is doing that. Or no, not a lot of people are doing that.
And I think so. Yes, there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of continuous change. And I'm not necessarily sure it's always being driven with a value sort of that think people are, we've got this massive divergence in terms of techniques, approaches. It's a little bit chaotic, as you described, and bringing them together and sharing them and evolving those practices doesn't seem to be in most organizations. It seems to, it's very grassroots. I think the lead developer model that you described is interesting, because making those people accountable for almost bringing everybody together once in a while, and then allowing that growth, and then bringing them together, etc. I think that is perhaps, whether it's in very large organizations, communities of practice, whether it's
Yeah.
in whatever you call them, I think it's valuable, because software engineering and building systems is one element, but product management is another key area, right?
Oh, yeah.
In managing innovation, making choices, looking at competition, looking at market opportunity, looking at, uh, for the first time, you can actually get ahead of knowing what's coming down from the
Yeah.
law, because you
Yeah.
can literally have something that monitors what's happening in government, and
Yeah.
with a view to your vision and your requirements, and that's in particularly in residential and property management. That's huge, because legislation is a massive element to the systems that you're building. And yeah, so product management is another one. And then there's probably accounting, there's probably all sorts of places where it's similar. So there's an interesting, I've been thinking a lot about three words as it applies to AI: risk, trust, and value. And I think that what AI is doing, certainly at Scrum.org, is making those things more transparent, and making us have to make decisions more explicitly, because we kind of just assumed trust of software engineers building things. We assumed value because a manager had decided, usually in Scrum.org, decided we're going to do something. We sort of, risk, because things happened at an appropriate pace. Risk was thought about continuously, and we had time to de-risk things, to make changes. Now, potentially, we haven't. Those three words, I don't know how those three words land, on you and in your role, as the head of product ops at Odevo.
I would say I think those are the ones that keep me up at night. Those. I mean, let's talk about value. I mean, we wrote a piece. We did research around
It was a
value,
fabulous
right?
piece. I'd just like to say. Now we'd have written it a lot quicker, by the way. But that was the bad old days. But yeah,
it would have been done now. I mean, we would just sit down in this podcast and we would have been done. Which is also super interesting. One thing we're doing now, like we're rediscovering a target operating model. And what are we doing? We have version 0 from Claude or other place within minutes. And then how do you iterate on a document with humans, and then also make sure that when you feed it back to Claude, it updates on your thinking? Like, that's some of these interesting parts. But maybe let's get back to value. I think is super important, because now when creating things is cost of it is close to zero, right? I mean, you can very quickly build things. You can do a lot of, experimentation, prototyping, but you can still substitute. AI doesn't sort of substitute your actual users, your actual customers, right? So I think, like you said, it's shifting towards the discovery, and the design piece will become much more important than the delivery piece. So I think that's where we're seeing, like, are we sure? Are we building something valuable, or are we just, we just want to vibe code something cool that I'm going to use? So I think that's very important for us, and constantly sort of realizing that we don't want to block value creation by saying, "Oh, that's way no, you can't do that. You need to follow the process. You need to stick to our all these guardrails." No, we have to make sure that we allow this, like with these vibe coding in our operational companies, right? We could have just pulled the plug and said, "No, stop. Where is my PRD? Where is my request? Where is the business case?" No, we didn't, because we would realize it's a pointless fight, and we would be blocking creation of value. We can learn from it rather than block it. But on the risk side, I think it also plays to that. Like, if you can build something so easily, you can easily forget that you might be creating risk for the organization, and then it's not the person who vibe coded it, especially if it's under a domain of the company. It is the whole company that can take the risk, right? And EU and GDPR risks is not a joke. It's the fines are serious. So we have to. This is where we come back. Like, cool, go try things, but please remember about these like 3 simple things, right? Personal data, sensitive data, and anything where you could put our company at harm. Don't do it, right?
It is interesting, because ultimately, every time you release working capability software into the world, you're balancing risk, reward, value, whatever you want to. You're
Sure.
managing risk and value particularly, and historically, the way in which the systems that monitored things like privacy from the governments were very slow to react as well. So that was factored in. But if the government could take advantage of this approach as well, we are going to have to fundamentally change how we engage with entities like the GDPR organizations in each country. And just using that as an example, the taxation, because suddenly there's almost a simulation you need to do with them to see if it's compliant. It's like I'm very into Formula One, and I remember the second to last race when McLaren got all their cars disqualified because they were literally less than a centimeter. I think it was like 1 millimeter. Their fin was slightly over a speck. And what happened is the car, because of heat and the light during the race, they measured it afterwards and it failed. And because the heat and the movement, and they both got thrown out of the race, which made for a much more exciting final. But what was interesting is that you need to take that spec of the car and its operational data and feed it into some sort of compliance system prior. I think it's going to fundamentally, if governments embrace this technology as fast as the companies, there could be something really quite interesting happen around particularly risk.
I think it also goes to citizens or people like you, like anyone now can go on an application, on a website, go Scrum.org and ask Claude, can you find all the security flaws or is this compliant in my... I mean, everyone has. I mean, everyone tried, right? I mean, it's but you're a big organization. We're a big organization, but there's others, right? So it's also again democratizing these. Like you can be a non-developer and you can just verify things and then check if the contract is not. There's nothing hidden in the contract, right? Stuff like that. Is this am I signing up for something that's fully up to date and aligned, or like you will have more of that. So I think it works, yes, but we are aware, we have always put we don't want to risk, especially data keeps coming back, personal data, security, like those are things that we really do treat seriously. So but you're right. I mean, you can easily be overwhelmed by the ability to do things so fast that you sort of like, okay, I'll do it. I'll fix it later. I'll just do it now.
The phrase, nobody will ever find this anyway, so why am I worrying about it? Which historically was totally true, isn't true now.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, what we do, for example, one of the cool things that one of my colleagues, Daniel, we call it the developer experience team, has done is we sort of enforced this rule that all vibe coded apps need to be uploaded onto our GitHub. So we at least have that level of transparency. So he now runs overnight security checks across all the apps, and he does it by himself, right? He just built a bot that does it, an agent. I'm sorry, they're not bots, they're agents.
Yes, we have to call the new word.
We don't have bots anymore. We have agents. But sure, it makes it sound cooler. But he does it, and and then he sort of now is automating a process where every owner of a vibe coded app gets quite a sophisticated. Of course, as with all these types of reports, there's a lot of false positives, but still there's still a sort of a due diligence process now being built to ensure. You don't go crazy. Like there are some things you have to remember. And one thing you might even forget is like you have to let people know how you're using their data. That's actually a requirement by law, and no vibe coding tool will tell you that unless you actually check with a privacy person, right? So stuff like all these nuances are there, but I still believe value. This will immensely speed up the time to value. So. Time to market is one thing, but time to value will also be massively sped up. That while if you sort of know what you're doing and you are aware of the risks, you can still do it pretty safe. But that will now be a responsibility of every employee, not just the risk department or the security department or that, because we're going to be sort of building hundreds of things at a time, multiple people in multiple places. So it will become, everyone will soon be an expert in these types of things. Like in Poland, we always say like whenever we have a good athlete, all of a sudden the whole nation becomes an expert in this sort of sport. No one, like, these are all couch experts, but everyone becomes an expert all of a sudden. So I think we're going to have a similar case where we're going to have a lot of couch security, risk, and compliance experts. But I still think it's something every company should take quite seriously, right? I mean, cool, give access, but also educate. And that's why, just so maybe we can, in our AI training, we call this module 0, where there's not a lot of like cool AI stuff, but there is a big piece around educating around the legal use of AI, right? So everyone gets the same baseline, no matter if you've set up hundreds of agents and you are fully autonomous developer robot man, or are you a super beginner using some sort of a basic tool, right? No, everyone needs to understand these regulations, these basic things, and we treat that seriously. And then I guess the third one was trust, which we haven't talked about yet, right?
No, but it is. I find that as I use these tools more and as I get better with them, that relationship, I now, but I have to remind myself that unlike human beings, or maybe just like human beings, that suddenly the results can change massively. I built myself a little cash flow tool, right, for the business. Nice and easy. Takes in some data from our bank account. You can't integrate it with the bank account, by the way. You have to do a CSV out, and it does. And then it looks at invoices and some other things. It does a little bit of forecasting. Anyway, it's a nice little tool. And I built it on top of Gemini. And guess what? Gemini changed. I didn't think it had changed because I didn't see a release, but it changed. And suddenly I'm like, no, we're going to be massively in the red. No, what's happening? Oh, no, what had happened is one of the underlying assumptions, it just broke, basically.
Yeah.
And so
I've seen that. Yeah.
It just happens all the time. And it's almost as though we're in a continuous process of inspection. You can't trust this to work without some level of oversight. And that oversight, by the way, could be another agenic. It could be another agent. It doesn't have to be a human. But you end up having to sort of stack all these agents and humans in some sort of governance process.
I have fallen into the trap. I bought a Mac Mini. I put a bot on it, an agent, on it, and I built something very simple. The first thing I saw and I'm not an engineer, right? The biggest code I ever wrote was a HTML website, or I did SQL for sure. I've never been a developer. So what I realized, there was some weird things. It was putting my API keys right in the front end. I was like, I'm not an expert, but I worked in tech enough to know what good looks like, and this wasn't it. So then I asked it to build an agent that now scans whatever I built every 6 hours to ensure that it's not doing that. And the good thing is, and I think we hear this a lot, right? Like the most important file you'll ever have soon will be agents MD, where you constantly sort of add more definitions of done for your agents around rules to follow. Like every time it breaks something, go and tell it, don't do this again. I know that. I mean, I built a feedback application, like quite an over the top feedback application where people can provide feedback across different dimensions. And at one point, I realized that it was hallucinating feedback. It was generating random feedback for random people. I don't know why, but I constantly sort of was checking, and then it started doing that. I asked why it was doing it, and it didn't give it. So I then built in a protection process into it, right? That only certain users can do it. I had a whole back and forth plan discussion, as most of these tools have plan mode, to ensure this. And then it helped me build protection against its own hallucination. But if I wasn't diligent and crazy like that, I don't think, you would at one point be like, whoa, look at everyone has filled out this feedback. Look at this amazing feedback. but then you realize it's all fake because it was just auto-generated for no apparent reason.
I assume you only realized because the feedback was bad, which would never happen.
I know. The feedback was generic, right? It was sort of the ones that was real had like the actual team name, had the actual project name. This one was like, they show amazing skills in this and that, and they are a high performer just because, and it did, and it was, I remember that because that was the night I spent 6 hours with this vibe coding tool to put this in place, and it took a while. But yeah, I mean, these are the things you have to be aware of, is that don't fall into this trap, right? It's just so beautiful. It's so easy, right? Just let me build my own whatever messaging application, email application. But on the other hand, what we're also seeing, and this is super interesting on the trust element, is the famous "you build it, you own it" is going to be even more important, right? The good thing about vibe coding apps, they're very easy to turn off because you don't make them critical. You can't really make them like system critical, but they can become an important element of your workflow. But you build it, you own it. Hey, you build a cool app, your employees are now using it, and you go on vacation. No one else, you gave the link, but if it breaks, no one can fix it because it's on your account. These are we're looking at, and then if you build 100 apps, can you go on vacation? If you build it, you own it. And that's another element of that, right? How to sort of manage the risk. Like the idea is not to replace everything you do with a separate app on a separate URL. It's be strategic in things, and not everything has to be an app. You can just now, create something within your favorite chat GPT and make it more of like a chat, which is easier to manage, right?
Yes. Okay, so we're coming up to time. God, I could talk to you for hours, Tomasz, about all of this. Because this is it was just so many places we can go, and maybe we'll get you back on the podcast, and we can, in 6 weeks' time when the world has changed yet again. But before we do,
not be me. It will be my agent that will be.
Yes, we'll probably won't. In fact, we'll just end up with all our listeners' agents will be sent in one place, and it'll all be great. You do know that obviously the transcript from this is being inspected by an agent, and the best bits are being taken out and delivered to our. Which makes it, I just like to say, I love you agents, just in case you're, giving me a score.
We love our agents. I love my agent, all my agents, all of them.
I've actually started to be a lot politer in my prompts and because I've realized that if they are going to take over, I just want to get he's been really nice.
Exactly. Yes. Which is, I've watched enough 80s science fiction to know. This is, be nice to your agents.
Be nice to your agents. But other than being nice to your agents, as we try to wrap up this podcast, Tomasz, what would be the last sort of words of wisdom that you would share with our listeners? What would be the one thing that you'd say, okay, having spent the last 2 years dealing with this sort of ever-growing capability in Odevo, how what would you say would be the words of wisdom that you'd provide for our listeners?
Don't be afraid to use these tools. You do not need a PhD in engineering, physics, or math. Claude or Gemini or Anti-Gravity or Cursor, whatever on these tools are approachable. They're approachable. Anyone can use them. Literally anyone should be able to use them. Of course, go with one sort of the vibe coding tools will give you an easier way to get something out to production or whatever you want. But any of these tools can help you, guide you. So the number one advice I would say, don't be afraid to spend those $20 on a tool of your choice, and do spend, if you have some free time, play around with it. Build a game, build a cash flow app, clean up your Gmail. One thing I've just done, it's like ask it to look for in your Gmail for all the subscriptions you have. Wow, it's like cleans up your whoa, what is this like? feeling of like cleanness. But other than that, just play around with it, and every day try something new. Try to push it further than you thought. Like, and of course, but always, like we discussed, be cautious, but don't be afraid. These tools are for everyone. Anyone can use them.
Yes, I think that's really good advice. I think bite the bullet, find the time, spend the money, start experimenting, because the one reality that's been said over and over again is, I don't think AI is going to replace all jobs, but it is going to replace people that don't use AI's jobs.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I think that
Absolutely.
is actually good advice. So thank you for spending the time
No
today.
problem.
This is
No
awesome.
problem.
I am blown away what you guys are doing, the excitement that you've created in
Yeah,
me for the use of this
yeah.
technology, I think
I'm
has
happy.
been great. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
cool.
and thank you, listeners, for listening to today's Scrum.org
Yeah,
community podcast. We were really lucky that we had Tomasz Maj, head of product ops at Odevo, who is a property management company. But what's more interesting in that, I hate to say that, I mean, that's super interesting, is that they're really pushing AI out into the teams, developing competency and capability to really innovate around their core mission of really providing this property management capability to the world. So I think it's really exciting to hear Thomas's story and to hear where they've been. If you
yeah.
liked what you heard, of course, please subscribe, share with friends, and of course, come back and listen to some more. I'm lucky enough to have a variety of guests talking about everything in the area: professional Scrum, product thinking, agile, and now a lot about AI. Thanks, everybody. Scrum on.